Welcome into the Small Business Banter podcast. Stu Gregor is my very special guest today. Great to have you in, Stu. Thanks for making time in a very busy schedule.
No problem, Michael. It's probably not as busy as you think right now.
Well,
it was probably a little bit busier a few months ago, but right now not that busy. But thanks for having me.
Look, I'm looking forward to finding out why you were so busy, a couple of months back, because that's kind of the essence of why we chatted. Stu is, amongst other things, a co-founder of Four Pillars Gin, and Stu and his two shareholder partners sold out recently to Lion, or sold the balance of the shareholding in that business. So we're going to drill down on that. But aside from that, Stu has his own business, has had for many years, called Liquid Ideas. It's a communications agency in food, drink, travel, lifestyle. Lots of time in the food and bev, hospitality, travel industry. Part owner of a bespoke travel business with your sister. Former panellist on ABC's Gruen. President of the Australian Distillers Association. Director of RUOK and OzHarvest, and then married with children. So it's pretty rich palette, Stu. And also I just found out becoming more of a golf nut. So thanks.
Importantly, Melbourne Business School alumni. If you don't mind.
Yes, if we don't mind. Yeah, that's how Stu and I met over. It was over a marketing subject, and it was about creating a new brand for bubbly, I think. So there you go. That was 20 plus years ago, down somewhere in Port Melbourne or Albert Park. We were locked up in a room trying to create a whiz-bang marketing campaign.
We were Albert Park, Bridport Street.
Yeah. So Stu, give us some time and some flavour and context about Stu Gregor and where he's been and where he is now.
Well, without wanting to bore you with too much detail, I suppose, after school, I guess if I look at a sort of, I'm 54 years old now, and as you just said, I've sold the Four Pillars business, which is a business that we've had running for the last 10 years. I sold out of that in July in 2023 and finished up with them in September of this year. And I've just come back from a little overseas, a bit of a holiday at the start of what is a designed sabbatical for 6 months to try to figure out what I'm going to do next. But I guess, I came out of the world of media, and journalism was kind of what I did straight out of school, and then found my way into the wine industry. Interestingly, I've got a little note here from a little winery called Rockford, where I worked out in the Barossa Valley back in the early 90s, mid-90s, and that's where I went to college and studied wine marketing, as it was called then, sort of wine business degree, if you like. And that's how I sort of morphed my journalism and communications abilities in with, sort of understanding a bit more about wine and drinks into creating a little business called Liquid Ideas that you just mentioned. And Liquid Ideas still exists today. In fact, I was out with the managing director of Liquid Ideas yesterday at an event called South by Southwest, an amazing marketing conference and whole of industry and futuristic conference in Sydney for the first time just yesterday. And Liquid Ideas goes from strength to strength, and Liquid Ideas advisors and counsels great spirits and wine and food and hospitality and travel businesses in their marketing and communications undertakings, basically. And that business still goes strong today. Still got 20 odd staff, and that business
that's been a constant. It's been a constant through the last.
And it was born out of an entrepreneurship subject at Melbourne Business School, actually, back in 1999, with a girl called Angie Bradbury, who started for Liquid Ideas up with me. Angie and I met in a lecture theatre at Melbourne Business School when we were both doing our masters. So that has been a constant. And I guess one of the reasons Four Pillars exists is that I've always loved the counsel. Like, I've always loved the idea of being I suppose a consultant or a specialist advisor and all that sort of stuff. But it frustrates me to a point, and this is probably why I left journalism. It frustrates me to a point where you tend to be the observer rather than the doer. you tend to be the person who gives all the advice, but you're not the person responsible for the ultimate decision making and the ultimate, creation of whatever it is. And I guess that when I was a journalist, I always, was interviewing interesting people, whether they were musicians or politicians or sports people. And I probably wasn't satisfied enough just being the person interviewing them. I thought it would be much more interesting actually to be the person doing something. And the same thing, I suppose, out of Liquid Ideas, once we were at a point where we were advising big spirits companies and beer companies and wine companies about stuff, I kept, in the back of my mind was always, well, why wouldn't I try to have a crack at doing something actually myself, like build my own brand or our own brand? And so when I got together with Cameron McKenzie, who was a guy I'd met back in the late 90s, back when I was studying with you, and then a guy called Matt Jones, who I probably met 10 years later, or 15, 12 or 13 years later, we got together and said, well, why don't we try to create a gin brand from scratch and basically do all the things we tell other people that they should be doing and actually prove that we can do it ourselves. And I think that's a great test of a consultant if they've got the runs on the board themselves.
Because it kind of says that you've got an innate desire to do something, and you're excited, and you can or you can't, and if you can't, you learn something about what you did wrong. So, yeah, it's because just to be backward in the background and consistently advising without ever testing whether you could actually implement some of what you talk about it's a significant step, isn't it?
It is. It's the difference between, frankly, the simplest way to describe it, it's the difference between walking the walk and talking the talk. Everyone can have the best ideas in the world and talk a great game, but if you've not got lived experience, you fall short by a certain percent. It's not 100%, because I think great advisors and great counsel and great consultants can be hugely valuable. I've been one for my whole adult life, essentially, or my whole sort of work life, but you learn so much more from having done it yourself and learned from it and made all the mistakes. And I think that's, if I look at Four Pillars, which was essentially a 10-year journey that started in 2013, and I got out in 2023, just towards the end of 2023, like right about now. It was that there were so many bits of advice I gave people over the years that came to help me, and there are also bits of advice I gave people that probably weren't in hindsight or in retrospect. I'm like, oh, okay, now I realize why they didn't listen to that piece of advice, because potentially it wasn't, I didn't look at the commercial implications or the distribution implications, or I hadn't really got my head around how, production. So, if I were to go back into consulting now to advise any sorts of businesses, I think I'm much better placed now to give them advice, having
got a few battle scars and also obviously a capacity to reflect and but that advisory role it needs to be very not black and white, but impartial, unemotional at times, and that's that sort of middle ground where to be an advisor, you've got to be able to detach sometimes and look at it just purely from an advice point of view, because no matter what the owner or the business founder is brewing up, it often doesn't make sense. So you've got to be hard. But anyway, so maybe through Liquid Ideas, that's that's an ongoing vehicle, and maybe you do kind of come back to businesses with a slightly different approach, which is a nice evolution of your view.
Yeah, look, I think so. I think everyone. It's an interesting time in life. Like I like change, and I like new things, and I like to push myself and challenge myself in various areas. And this is an interesting one because now, the first thing you get asked one thing and get told one thing, right? In this weird little sort of zombie state where you're the Walking Dead. You're sort of retired, but you're not retired. You certainly don't want to be retired, but there are certain contractual things that you can't do. So there's a whole lot of things that you might want to do, but you can't because you've got non-compete agreements and all that sort of stuff. And then And then people ask you, so what's next? What are you doing now? What are you going to do next? Like straight away, like within days of having left the business. What are you going to do next? What's your next plan? What are you going to do? And then you get told by other people, take a break. Don't do anything. You need some time out. You need to rest and reset and think. And so it's a really interesting phase of your own life, which is people really want to know what you're doing, but people are also at the same time telling you not to do anything. And I wake up every day with another stupid idea of what I want to do, and I go to bed thinking, well, that wasn't the best idea, and I wake up the next morning with another one. I mean, yesterday I was going to open a cafe in Coogee. The day before, I think I was going to make whiskey in New Zealand. So I mean, I don't know where I'm going to land.
Well, what that tells me is there's energy, and I deal with a lot of business owners, and there are some who I think are completely and utterly spent, and they're looking to do something else. And there's a lot who are hardwired because of 20, 30 years of experience being in charge of the business, having good days, having bad days, but fundamentally not being able to go and just happily walk the dog. I in this whatever episode, I think it's 135, like I've used this expression, I don't want to walk the dog, with a few expletives, because a business owner said that to me one time, and it was we'd gone through a process of trying to sell their business. It was never enough money, and long story short, after a while, it turns out this particular owner could see through and go, I without my business, I don't know what I'd do. And I think it might be really a negative. So, there's for you, it sounds like there's, you can't, if it doesn't turn off, well, that's you just got to deal with that, and that's a good thing, and find the right channel. Yeah,
I guess I'm lucky in that even if I can't figure out what it is, I do still have the consulting business, the liquid businesses that I could lean into. Although yesterday the girl who's the managing director there, and she's been there about 2.5 years, and she's a really, really talented young and digitally focused, like really clever young woman. And we were at South by Southwest yesterday, so there was a lot of people around, and there was a lot of sort of networking and chatting and talking and drinking and there's me telling her everything I know, and she's like, "Is this what it's going to be like if you come back?" Because I'm not sure I need this, because I can be quite a
You're not needed here, Stu.
I can be quite a tornado of ideas and talking, and she was like, "Oh God, this is a lot." Because I made me meet up with her once a month for 30 minutes at the moment. Now she's terrified that I'm going to come back and sit in the office 4 days a week just yelling a lot. So.
It's a function of the same thing, that you're engaged and interested and alive, and you can't help yourself. But that's one of those, when an owner sells and there's an earn out or there's a period, particularly if they sell to staff in small businesses, which happens a lot. So you got to contemplate this sort of governance thing and specific roles, because you're no longer the owner or you're no longer the CEO. So it's respectful for the rest of the team to let them do what you and the board or the advisory board tell them is their KPIs or their role. So but it's hard to let go.
It is. Look, I can't imagine what it's like to sell to staff, like an MBO or something like that. Like I'm imagining that would be difficult. I mean, we had I knew I was so. There were 3 founders of 4 pillars, and 2 of them have stayed in the business. But I knew that I was not capable of doing that, and actually, I said that I would stay for 2 months, from July 1 to September 1, to help with the transition and just help make it. We just thought from the point of view of optics, me not leaving the day the deal was signed up, we just thought, well, that's probably not the best look of all time. But I was a terrible employee for that 2 months. Like, I was a disaster, because I'm not used to not owning the business. I'm not used to not being able to tell everyone my thoughts and how to act. And also going from being what was a dynamic small business with 3 founders who who are contactable every day of every week, and to being a corporate entity that had all these rules and regulations and HR departments and all that sort of stuff. I just found it, frankly, completely
two worlds collide.
Yeah, I found it like suffocating. I was terrible, and apart from having no official role other than being the co-founder who's
you're
out
like
of
the
business
loose player in the back line in the AFL, right? You just had you're allowed to roam and go where you. But it was a very funny. It was a very funny couple of months. In hindsight, over the years, I'll look back on it and think it was a very, very interesting time of my my life. Well, it is. You go from a startup with fellow founders, mates, had this great idea, and I think I'd love to kind of go back a little bit to the start of that. But that energy, focus in a startup like that. I had 3 years in a startup just after finishing my MBA with you, and I've never worked as hard, but I've never seen a group of people move the dial so much, because every day you'd come in and it mattered and it was up to you. It was just I don't know if I'd ever do it again. I mean, I've started my own business after that, but the pace isn't and couldn't be sustained like that. So so we go back. It wasn't a garage that you started in. It was a Four Pillars was a because what I'd like to do is just recap on Four Pillars story, and just talk to you a little bit more about the process, because this podcast is more and more about helping owners who have got a business, could be worth 200,000, $1 million, 5 million, 10, whatever. It's important to them personally and financially. I want them to, be more aware of what an exit could be like. What are the other options? So where did Four Pillars start, and what was the genesis of it?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. I mean, it's interesting to talk about exit, and I'm happy to talk about how we managed our way through that, and how we set it up for success, a successful exit, because we have just it's only happened in the last couple of months. But I mean, it was so Cameron McKenzie and I, who were mates and who had both worked in the wine industry, and he lived in the Yarra Valley and I lived in Sydney, and we made a bit of wine together and tooled around a bit over the years. In about 2011 or 2012, started thinking, and we had made some wine on the side, but we had never done anything particularly serious. We together thought maybe we should do something. What might it be? I mean, we landed on gin. We met, fortunately, a third partner, a guy called Matt Jones, who neither of us had known before, but in a very short period of time, we realised that he would be a great third partner in terms of his ability to write strategy and his ability to bring, the sort of our ideas together and package them up and work with a digital team and a website team and a brand and build a brand strategy. Because I think a lot of small businesses don't do that sort of thing at the start, and they should. We weren't particularly, super well capitalized. I mean, we did start it up in the back of a mate's shed, he had a winery in the bottom end of the Yarra Valley. If anyone knows Victoria, it's in Warrandyte South, so it's not really the Yarra Valley. You can tell anyone from outside of Melbourne it's the Yarra, but if you're in Melbourne, you know that it's really not the Yarra. It's Wonga Park, basically. And we raised a bit of money. The three of us put money in. We just remortgaged our houses. We got 20 investors who put sort of 25, 30 grand in each, and we promised them nothing much more than a bit of gin and a hell of a ride.
So it's a bit like a crowdfunding thing before that, really, as in you go to your network of friends and say, look, put a relatively small amount of money in, you'll get some product.
Yep. And we also did, so we did a crowdfunding. We did a virtual or a plausible campaign as well. But that wasn't for equity. That was just to get the first batch of the gin, right? That was just a publicity exercise as much as anything else, but also an ability for us to drive a consumer database from the beginning, from the get-go. So our 20 investors put in real money for a piece of the business, and then away we went. And the three of us kept 60 odd % of the business between the three of us, equally split. And away we went. And at the time, I was, holding down my real job, which was Liquid Ideas, and our mates who put the money in, had an expectation that we would take it seriously enough. So, we said sort of, okay, well, we will most likely be in this business full time within the next couple of years. Matt said the same thing. Cameron was in the business full time from the get go, and away we went. We didn't begin the business with an exit in mind. And I think that's one thing that I don't think you can do. I don't think you can be motivated in the right way if you're going in to get out, right? Yeah. Because you've got to get in to be in, right? You've got to want to be
and you've got to be all in.
Yeah, and you've got to love the job. You've got to build something that becomes worthy of other people's attention, right? You don't I sort of cringe when and I see a lot of business proposals and small business and startups go past my desk because everyone thinks that either I'm a wizard or I've got more money than I have or whatever, that I should be an investor in their small business startup, whatever it happens to be, whether it's menswear or distilling or facial care or distribution or whatever the businesses are. They, a few of them come to me, and I worry that they're already talking about an exit strategy when they haven't even got an entrance strategy. You've got to get in and build something, and it's only if you build something successful that you're going to be able to have a good exit. Right?
I'm really pleased to hear you say that, Stu, because it kind of poisons the water a bit that unless you have an exit in mind, that you're kind of off track already. And I agree with you. You got to barrel in and get stuck into this just purely to make it work day to day, and then. Yeah. Yeah, because we will talk about how the exit came about, but I think it's comfort to a lot of owners that you don't have an exit plan at the start. I don't know how many ever start a business with that in mind. I think it's a very small proportion. But the further you go, the further you get closer to the point where you probably should think about some kind of exit plan, but not necessarily. I think they're also pretty limited in a lot of ways. They just assume a lot of things that there's only one kind of buyer, and the exit's the only option. There's not. There's a lot of other ways out.
Yeah, look, I'm not. I'm not an expert in that. You're the expert at that. But I mean, I don't even think for the first 5 years we even gave it a minute's thought. I don't think we necessarily were thinking this business will go forever and our children will inherit it, because we did have external investors who at some point either we were going to have to pay them out of our own pockets, or they were expecting us to sell to someone. I mean, we really didn't give it for 5 years. We just ploughed on to try to make the best gin distillery business that we could.
So was a focus on being the best you could, like a pure. Yeah. This is we started this to make the best, what you consider the best gin in the world, and that was purely and only the focus.
Correct, and it had to be. I mean, not just to make it, but to market it as the best gin in the world, to have the best events in the world, to have the best distribution in the world, to build a business. I mean, far be it for me to go back to the P's of marketing, but I mean, you have to be world class at all of them, whether it's price, promotion, product, packaging, people, all that sort of stuff. So, we had to become the world's best at, or amongst the world's best at everything. But we were very lucky in timing. And again, one of the things, I was actually talking to a mate this morning on a walk around here, that just because you had a bit of luck and a bit of success in one business does not make you an expert in your next business or in any other businesses. And we were lucky in terms of timing. We came into the gin industry where there were maybe 10 or 12 people making gin in Australia, and today there's over 300. So we were very lucky in that we had whilst we weren't the first mover, we certainly had an early mover advantage, right? We were at the early part of the wave of gin distilleries. Right now, you're at the bottom of the wave, and you've got to paddle like crazy, and some will succeed and many and some will not.
And it probably won't be because the quality of the gin isn't there. It's because it's just so crowded and
correct.
Yeah,
it's just increasingly difficult to find space. Shelf space, like actual space on a shelf, and also sort of space in consumers' minds. So it is it's a tough market now. I mean, but that's not to say there are plenty of markets that are crowded that a newcomer can succeed if they are very single-minded, if they are offering something that is unique and brilliant. And right now, I say to people right now that the minimum chips to enter is to have a world-class product. Like if your product can't win a gold medal at the International Wine and Spirits Competition or something in San Francisco or something in Melbourne or whatever else, then you don't have a right to earn a consumer's trust, because the consumer's already got enough gins. Many of the consumers have enough gins on their shelf or out when they go drinking. So you need to earn the right for consumers to, and we're in a cost of living crisis at the moment as well, right? So people, $80 bottle of gin is not an everyday occurrence for most people. So it's got to be special. It's got to be something that's really, really good. So it's a tough time now, but we were lucky in that we got in early, and then we won a bunch of things early. And I guess if I'm talking to people who are thinking about setting up a business of any description, is how expert are you in this industry and this category beyond everyone else? Like we had 50 combined years of expertise in drinks, marketing, activation, brand strategy. Right now, that's a big advantage over someone who wants to set up a gin distillery who's come out of a super fund, or they've come out of having worked in finance and they've just decided that they're going to get into gin.
The numbers look good, so
yeah.
But I think I can only imagine that how you, as three mates and shareholders, work together was also incredibly important, because you can go into business with your family and friends and it can be a complete disaster. So that I think that must have been I'm sure there were there's ups and downs, but fundamentally I think you're still mates with them, so that's tick. You've gotten through a lot together, and to still be able to
look, and again, I think that's not science. I mean, I think we were lucky. I think we hardly knew Matt when we came in with him, and we were just lucky. Okay. We were just lucky with him that he was as good as he is, or is. Yeah, he's not dead. And Cameron and I had worked together before, and we knew that we could work together, and we knew that we had, we had a certain symbiosis. He was good at certain things and I was good at other things. So we weren't necessarily going to get in each other's way, and we trusted each other. I think one of the things about if you are going to go into business with a mate or a friend or a colleague and that sort of stuff is not just understand your lane, but you've got to have this inherent trust in the other person's ability and integrity, and you just can never have doubts. Like, I don't think, we fought and we disagreed, but we never doubted each other's intent or each other's ambition or each other's, honesty. Like, we never... That never came into it, and I think that the place where relationships break up and partnerships break up is when there's a fracture in your trust, and I never had a fracture in trust with Cameron. It's not to say we didn't agree on everything, but I never questioned his intent. Yeah.
No, look, it's very definitely a fortunate thing to be able to go in and keep functioning at the different levels. It's still as in the background friends, but in the foreground we're on a mission here to create the world's best gin and market the world's best gin. And so often I think founders or prospective business partners, they kind of leap at we know each other, but they've never really tested how they're going to work together before they work together. Like, so you can get lucky, but you can also, I've seen it come apart and tear a family, or tear mates or friends, or, or a couple. It's just, so you can put in place a couple of things. But so you said there was no, so the first 5 years, no exit in mind. I as I said, I love that. It was about probably a recognition underneath all of that if it doesn't work, well, we gave it an absolute red hot crack. And so you roll forward, we're probably going to miss out on a few details, but how many years was it before you realised you had something that was, you got awards for your gin, but that it became something that might be of interest to a bigger company, or might be valuable financially, and we've had a good run? Can you talk about?
I reckon it's 4 or 5 years, right? So I think if we say we started in 2013, I reckon it was towards let's call it the 5 year mark. Let's say it's 2018. So we've the gin wave has sort of begun. We've built in 2015. We bought a shed in Healesville, which, for those of you who don't know the Yarra Valley, so we've gone from being in a crappy part of the Yarra in Warrandyte to buying a beautiful timber yard right in the heart of Healesville, and we opened that in 2015. So let's call that 2 years after, 2.5 years after we started. We opened a really beautiful distillery door. And I think the moment where we started thinking, crikey, this could be good, is when people were queuing up out the front of our distillery on Saturday mornings, waiting to come in to taste the gin and have a drink. And we thought, crikey, maybe we're onto something here. We'd had a couple of a little bit of success in a few awards. People started to know us. We'd been able to get good distribution. So, you could buy us in Dan Murphy's, and you could buy us in some nice places overseas. And I think that
was that an overt and a conscious focus on, we've got a great product, but we still got to market the crap out of it?
Or marketing's everything. I say to everyone, making it's easy, selling it's hard.
Yeah.
Right.
Which can be and it can be a founder's challenge. I want the best, the most pure, the leading edge, but you got to sell it.
If you don't have a customer, it doesn't matter how good your product is, right? Great. You can sit at home and masticate all you like about how wonderful your product is and why yours is better than everyone else's. But it frankly doesn't matter if you don't have a customer base.
Yeah.
Unless you just want to do it for shits and giggles. Right? If you're in the business just for a passion project just because you want to make the world's best gin, well, that's great. But that's not a commercial undertaking. That's not a proper commercial enterprise. That's just a really nice hobby.
It's an honourable artisan
There's nothing wrong with
pursuit,
that at all. And there are people out there who are doing it in every category, and good luck to them. But we were interested in making it into creating a business, and creating a viable business that was going to employ lots of people and help build a category. And when I think so, if I go back to the 5 year point, I think by 2018, we had created a bloody Shiraz gin. We created a Christmas gin. We created gins that didn't really exist, subcategories within gin that didn't really exist. We'd never strayed from the idea that we only wanted to make gin, and I think we were easily Australia's biggest gin brand by then, and we were Australia's biggest craft spirit brand by then, and we probably had half of the Australian gin market to ourselves. And that I think began to get attention of a few of the bigger players. They're let's say the Mr. Global Spirits Company once a year might fly to Australia and have a look around and go, well, what the hell is this Four Pillars gin? It seems to be everywhere, and people are talking about it, and it's winning these awards, and I've seen it pop up in a liquor store in London or New York, and what is it? And it was as simple as that. I actually do remember that the world's biggest distilling business is a business called Diageo. A couple of the guys at Diageo were friends of ours, and they liked us, and I had worked with them in the past as a consultant, and their local marketing director said, hey, we've got a bunch of the global guys in for a session on learning about stuff. Would you guys come in and just chat about Four Pillars? I said, sure, of course we would. We love, these are the people who own Tanqueray and own Gordon's and Smirnoff and Bailey's and Guinness. And, they're the biggest and best spirits business in the world. And we said, sure, and they gave us like 45 minutes. We went into their office. We told them all about the Four Pillars story. They loved it. We showed them, we tasted some gin with them. And I think that was probably the first moment where and then they came back, and the marketing guy from Australia came back. He said, mate, they fucking love it. They think you guys are unreal. And we're like, oh, really? Yeah. He said, yeah. And, there's, they think your business is fantastic, your brand is fantastic. And, they didn't say, we want to buy you, but we got this sort of sense that, okay, there might be something going on here. And that was probably the first time where we thought, okay, there's something going on here. And because at the time I was also chairing the Distillers Association, so I was chairing the Craft Spirits Association, like and I was at that time sort of going to more and more meetings with all the big spirits companies, because we were trying to lobby government about tax and excise and all that sort of stuff. So I would hang out with the boss of Pernod Ricard, which is the huge business that owns, Chivas Regal and Absolute Vodka and all that sort of stuff. And I was hanging out with the boss of Brown Forman that owns Jack Daniels, or the boss of Beam Suntory that owns Jim Beam and Canadian Club. And we would often talk, and they would sometimes just in casual conversation having beers say that, oh, mate, you guys are doing so great, Four Pillars. My boss in Asia has heard about you and is wondering what's going on. And I don't know, obviously they've got gin brands, and they're looking at the gin category in Australia, and they're going, how, what's this Aussie gin brand doing? So we were getting a bit of a sense that they're not that they were going to buy us, but that we were certainly on a few radars. And I guess that was enough for us to start thinking, well, what's next?
Oh, okay. So I was going to ask. So did you kind of recalibrate what we're going to do with this business on the basis of an intuition that we've got something here that's getting attention globally by big companies?
Yeah, look, I think what we, to be honest, what we did then is we just basically went and said, what do we do? And because I was sort of,
did you actually did you engage advisors or anything?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Eventually we did. So what I did is I had a couple of conversations with a few mates who were like heads of some of these international companies, and I said, tell me truthfully, would there be any ambition or interest in the Four Pillars business before I go any further, before I go and appoint people? And I spoke to a few, and a couple of them said, yeah, you know what, I think there might be. The gin category's booming. They can see globally that it's fast growing. Yeah, I think there might. Stay tuned. I'll take it to my boss's boss. They might only have a meeting once every 6 months with the global head of acquisition who's based in Manhattan or New York or Milan or London or wherever. And I actually remember coming towards the end of, which was probably 2018, we got one of those calls, which was from one of the very large businesses to say, would you come over and present your credentials to the global CMO and the head of M&A in London? And I went, shit my pants. Well, I didn't shit my pants, but I was like, okay, right, now this is step number 2.
This is a mix of emotions here. This is raw excitement.
This is now a thing. And I remember ringing a friend of mine in Melbourne who actually had gone through the MBA a couple of years before us, and she was a really good business person based in Melbourne, and I know she had worked at Grant Samuel before, so she'd done a bit of work with mergers and acquisitions. And I said, who's the best in Melbourne? Not just Melbourne, but who would do a small, advisory job around M&A and that sort of stuff for our little business? And she put me onto a little group called Canterbury Partners, who are based out of
Simon Jones,
Jonesy, and Richard Teasdale. And so I remember ringing him over. It was because it was over the Christmas period. He was skiing somewhere because, and I was in Sydney, and we had to be in London by the end of January. And I said, mate, you don't know me, but Mog's put me onto you, and this is the business, and this is what we are, and, would you be able to advise us? And he said, sure, I know a bit about the business. I drink a bit of your gin. And so we got on with him, and they helped us through the entire process, which probably took the next, probably took 12 months.
Yep.
Of lots of meetings and lots of pulling together business plans and lots of pulling together, ideas and, P&Ls and everything else to then actually talk to a couple of the very serious players.
Yeah. But wise enough to get some experts like Canterbury Partners at Simon and Julian.
There was no way we could have done it without them.
No, and that is a very sage piece of advice. For other owners, get some external counsel on this stuff because, I mean, it's invasive. It's often new ground.
Yep.
And you want someone who's kind of had a few run throughs in terms of how you play this, because there's a lot at stake.
Yeah, look, I would absolutely unequivocally, and one thing I do when anyone says to me, we've had some interest or we want to try to exit or we want to try to raise money, I tell them to go get advice. And I mean, I would just tell them to go to Canterbury Partners because they're the ones I know and I trust and I like. And I would say to them, look, go, and because there are very few people who start a business. You may start a craft business, whether it's in, shoemaking or or wine or spirits or whatever the hell it is. Very few of us are experts in M&A and dealing with multinationals who may buy us. And Simon is experienced in that. And it's also a really good when the negotiation gets difficult, which it inevitably will, and when you want to argue points that you feel very passionate about, it's good to have a third party in there who can argue that point on your behalf so you don't fracture the relationship between you and the buyer. That you can have that third party, a bit like, engaging a lawyer to defend you, you can engage that third party so that they can have that argument and say, look, the founders will not accede to that request. It will not happen, rather than you stamping your feet and saying, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to do that, and then potentially fracturing the relationship that you may have ongoing with the purchaser.
Because
particularly if you have to stay or there's an intention to stay in the business for a period, whether it's a 3 to 5 year earn out or whether it's a lifetime or whether it's 6 to 12 months. You don't want to end up, you and the MD of the business that's acquiring you, hating each other's guts.
Yeah, and it becomes much more, or even more pronounced when you're dealing with staff buyouts, which because you've got to take your employee hat off and put on your buyer's hat. But it can't. Adversarial's probably not the right way. It should be points of contention, but that middle party to explain, to rationalise, to put it into context and say, look, there's 10 things on the table here that are contentious. We probably won't. We may not win all 10, but does it look okay if we get 7? So that sort of impartial, calculated thinking is really important from a good advisor.
100%. I couldn't. As I said, I could not have done it without them, and I think that they are. And they see and they put things into a deal that you would never have put into a deal because they know what can happen down the track, and you don't. Certainly, we certainly didn't. Yeah. So I would counsel getting great advice, and Canterbury Partners were certainly fantastic.
Yeah. So from there, what were the biggest stresses for you? I imagine that was you go back to work, you keep running a great business. But what were the stresses that you and the other founders felt from that point on?
Well, there was...
Or concerns or...
Yeah, I mean, there were plenty of concerns. Well, so working through 2018 into 19, when we discovered that there was one very serious potential buyer, which was Lion, and a couple of others who were tire kicking, but certainly interested. But, we had our, by the end of 2018, we had enough discussions with Lion to know they were serious. We knew that they were a beer company, but they were very keen to get in to owning craft spirits, and that we were their priority target.
So you really got into their heads, and you could see why it made sense for them. It wasn't just tire kicking or the
equivalent. They had a managing director who I liked, who I trusted, who I still do to this day. They had a pretty clear idea that they were in the craft beer space, and they wanted, they saw the growth. Beer was relatively flat, and craft spirits was growing. They also wanted to buy the distribution business who distributed Four Pillars, and that made a lot of sense because that meant that we wouldn't lose the sales team that we had selling Four Pillars, because we were well over half of the business of the sales team. So it was beginning to make a lot of sense, and then it becomes an argument over price as much as anything else. I mean, roles, responsibilities, all that sort of stuff, and that can become pretty fraught. I in many ways, Matt and I probably took the lead on most of those negotiations, and it took. They always take longer than you expect. There are always hurdles that you think are insurmountable that get thrown in your way when you think it's all done and dusted. But it's really and if you don't have a good lawyer and a good advisor, trying to do it on your own, I think would be too much. Particularly at the number, without saying it's easier if it's less money, but if it was 100. You're not going to pay Canterbury Partners and Norton Rose Law Firm if you're doing a deal for $200,000, but you are if you're doing a deal for $100 million.
Yeah.
Because that couple $100,000 you spend on advisors and everything else is relatively small compared to what's happening at the end. Hang on a minute. Here you go. Out you go, Muzz. So the dog's off for a walk.
Good stuff.
See, I don't want to walk the dog. Didn't you say
I did.
I don't want to walk the dog?
Yeah, some people do, but some people don't. Yeah. But also, I think it sounded like you had a pretty good relationship with the buyer, essentially the CEO, and so all the dissonance along the way, the ups and downs, against the backdrop of a fundamentally strong relationship where you understood why they were buying. So, it kind of gives you a bit of comfort, I think, to keep investing in the processes and have a few wins and losses, but, come out at the other end with what you might consider a pretty good deal. So, we talked about the stresses, keeping on in the business. Did that become a bit harder? And in terms of your focus, did you start to get?
It was really distracting. I mean, it was really distracting in 2019. So the deal was actually finalised in March 2019. So for that first 3 months of 2019, I mean, I spent most of my time trying to sort of finalise the terms of the deal itself, which was stressful because it wasn't something that I was particularly that I was in any way an expert at. It takes a lot of time. I think this was to sell 50% of the business. We'd had this concept in our head that we would sell half of the business and that we would work in and earn out into the deal, because we knew we had a lot of unfinished business. I think if we just decided at that time to sell 100% of the business, one, I don't think we would have realised its true value, and two, it just would have been too early to exit, right? We just had too much other stuff we wanted to do, and there were too many more things that we needed to achieve. And there were, we went to them and said we wanted to build this whole new distillery down in the Yarra Valley. So we knew that we needed more funds for that. So they for us to build this new dream distillery that we had.
So you became partners then, in a sense, and with a shared interest in building the business properly, which you may not have been able to do without them.
Correct.
Or without a partner.
Yes. I mean, that was 2019 to 2023, which were interesting years because we started 2019, by the end of 2019, we had won the world's best gin distillery, the first Australian distillery to win that. And that was in London. End of 2019, things were going great. We were really growing duty-free business, which is a huge amount of business in the spirits business, which is, airports and what's called global travel retail. So we were doing that in Sydney and Melbourne, but also in Changi and in other airports around Asia in particular. And then, of course, 2020 arrived and the shit hit the fan, and all of our international markets and all of our on-premise markets, which is our hospitality markets, which is bars and restaurants, all basically closed in the space of 3 months. And, that you're talking half your business. So, we had to do what everyone else did, which was figure out a way to keep the doors open, which was to sell lots of gin online to people direct and deliver cocktails to people at home because they couldn't go out to their favorite bars, to make hand sanitizer for 3 months, and sort of exist through that. And Melbourne was particularly difficult, as you well know, that we were not able to even to take visitors from Melbourne to our distillery door because we were outside the ring of steel. And it was a tough, I suppose, 18 months. We were able to open for a short period and then close again and then open. And
so
that
with
decimated our business plan, our all the plans that we'd written at the start of 2019. That was the growth strategy to get us to a sale price for 2023 was fairy tale stuff by the end of 2020.
So but your 50% partner was locked in, and so did that come together and look, this is a highly unusual event. We're going to have to pivot, do different things. How did the relationship with your partner at that point, fellow shareholder?
They were great. So this was Lion. So this is part of Kirin. So they were great. So I mean, the dates get all a bit vague, but let's say we're out of the pandemic at the end of 2021, sort of October, November 21. Yeah, is that right? That's about right, isn't it?
It's a blur.
So we'd been about 18 months in and out, and it became pretty obvious within a few months of that it was going to take a while for global travel retail to restart. People getting back into flying around the world and buying 2 bottles of gin on their way out and 2 bottles of gin on their way in, which is what all Australians do. We realised that, pubs and clubs and restaurants and bars who had not been open for 18 months, were going to be much more cautious about what they ordered and what spirits they bought. And, and also our export markets that we hadn't even been able to visit for the best part of 2 years were struggling because people were going much more local, right? So the American market was saying, well, do we really need craft gin from Australia, or can we just get craft gin from Colorado or California or Idaho, wherever we are? Similarly, in the UK, we'd seen a huge growth in the small craft gin businesses based in England, as an example. So by the early part of 2022, we knew that the mechanics that we had in place for the second tranche of the sale were decimated. So we had to start to think about how we could retool it. And to their credit at Lion, we said, look, what we have in this contract about the price that you may or may not pay for the second half of the business is a nonsense now. We need to rewrite it and we need to recraft it so you buy a better business and we get a fairer price, and that we don't just chase crazy sales in one financial year in order to
hit a financial KPI,
a crazy EBIT target and a crazy net sales target that we will do by shafting the brand and overselling and underpricing and sacking the wrong people in order to hit a number that satisfies us. And to their credit, it took about the best part of 6-9 months for us to negotiate an agreed price for the second half of the business, and that's what ended up happening in July this year, just past.
And so, a burning question I wanted to ask you was what Lion were really buying. I mean, there's a lot of M&A, a lot of transactions done. A lot of it's about synergies on the finances, bottom line. Do we have and what you just said then about this, a bit their capacity and willingness to kind of reframe things, did they? How much of it was fundamentally buying a brand versus just some physical assets and some revenue streams.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, I always say that no one buys anything other than a brand if they're smart, right? I mean, in our industry, at the very least, they didn't need to buy alcohol machines. They have a lot of alcohol machines, right? They didn't need to buy stills because anyone can just go out to the market and buy a still. What you can't buy is a brand that exists with a huge amount of customer loyalty, that exists with a huge amount of awareness, that exists with a huge amount of love. People loved Four Pillars by this stage, right? You can't. They don't love your physical assets. They don't love the bottling line and the forklift and the stills. Even they love the whole of the business. They love maybe the Healesville and the people who represent us and the brand itself and the gin itself, obviously. So you buy the goodwill around the business, right? But because you already have established that the gin itself is world class, that the hospitality is excellent, that the people are good, and so you buy the whole of the business. And so and interestingly, you probably don't get the multiple that you might if you were a beer business, because with a beer business selling into a beer business, they can just plug you in and triple your sales overnight because, so for instance, that Stone and Wood that happened the year before we sold into Lion, Stone and Wood sold into Lion. And that's a great brand, and they're buying a beautiful brand and great beer and everything else. But that's your synergy play, right? Because another beer brand, another tap, a really popular brand, we can make it probably less expensively, but just as well. And we can, whatever their sales numbers are now through independent distributors, which a brand like Stone and Wood would have had, can be trebled by plugging them into a business where we sell 4X and Tooheys New and West End and Swan. So there's they didn't have that infrastructure with spirits that they did with beer, although they had a growing infrastructure of spirits distribution. So that was important to us as well.
Yeah. Stu, I think with small businesses, their brands kind of and goodwill's a dirty word in a lot of ways because what buyers tell you they're looking for is secure revenues but I just think this highlights that there is if you care about your business and build a brand and a story, it's got to help to differentiate you, at least, if not make it easier to sell at the right time. Was there a sense for you and the co-founders of selling your baby after all this time? Did roll forward to just recently? What's the for you particularly because you're out?
I mean, that's still very fresh. Yeah, that's very fresh for me. I mean, I'm in that place right now, like literally as recently as yesterday, where I saw some Four Pillars, stock rolling into a bar, and I'm like, and I had both positive and negative vibes around what was happening, and I don't really know what I meant to do about it because I can't be the guy who texts the marketing director or the head of sales and has a crack at them about something because it's not my job anymore. But I also can't be a guy who is negative Nancy about stuff to others, and I also, I can't interfere with, we've made a decision to sell the business, and there are other people now running the business, and you've got to give them their space, and that's not easy for me. I mean, the other boys are still in the business, so they can say whatever the bloody hell they want because they're still involved in the business on every day, and they still get a salary. And equally, I've got to be careful that I don't keep, I just don't keep engaging with a business that I'm no longer employed by, right? You've got to. Yeah. I mean, and it actually is really difficult, and it's probably going to be difficult for the next frankly, a couple of years.
Who knows, Stu? It's a very personal thing, and it's it's deep seated, and it's completely understandable and natural. And for you, for me, it's all going to be different. But yeah, it's that just evidence of how much the trip meant in terms of starting it and getting it to where it is. But as we talked about at the start, there'll be other opportunities that will really excite you, and I'm sure that it sounds like you're getting plenty coming your way. You might get
There's no shortage of options. I'm just not sure how many of them are good, and I'm not.
We're getting good at saying this is in the to-do pile or the
the
junk pile.
I hope so. I hope so. It's a. I think one of the interesting things, without getting overtly philosophical about life and being a middle-aged white man, but I think it's interesting and important to continually challenge yourself, right? And this is a challenge for me. It's both it's not necessarily a challenge for me in creating something, but it's a challenge for me in figuring out how I can, if I can slow down, or if I can make measured decisions, because I'm not necessarily good at that. I'm more about just drive and keep going for things and having a crack, and if you fuck it up, just try another route and all that sort of stuff. And it's an interesting, I'm finding it a really like a genuine challenge to pull back,
because
I'm not a pull back guy. I'm a push forward guy, and pull back is not my my natural disposition. So I'll be interested to see if I'm even capable of doing it over the next 6 months. To be honest, it is pretty fresh and raw. So I think if I could give you a little bit of counsel, just work your way through it. No, it's I have dealt with a lot of owners, and they get to a point where they think they should sell. They get to the point where they have to sell, but however they get there afterwards, it's really different for a lot of them. And I so for me, I'm trying to, in the work I do, trying to encourage owners, when you think about having an exit, that's one of the things you ought to think about. But the others are, what are you going to do? Where are you going to find? What are other ways to run your business so you have a bit each way? But fundamentally, before you can answer any of those questions, you have to kind of ask yourself, what am I happiest doing? And going from working and putting everything you've got, and that's not, that can be, being out of balance is probably not what we're advising here. But when you can't constrain yourself, you're excited and you want to put everything into it, it's pretty hard to just stop and go walk the dog or whatever. So I need some hobbies. That's what I've realised. That's why golf is going to become important. I need something to occupy my mind.
Well, we all do. It's stimulating and it's healthy, and so. Stu, I know you've got some commitments. Really enjoyed chatting through. Thank you for being, so open and insightful about something that, it's gotten a lot of press, and it's a big deal. Sound like Donald Trump, but it's a significant deal, and it's congratulations to all three of you for going through that from the beginning to where you got to, and
thanks, man.
It's there's nothing for owners to hear from other owners and founders about what it was like. So I hope I'm sure they will take a lot out of today. I look forward to you and I catching up when you're down our way for that game of golf and
round of golf at Point Lonnie.
Lonsdale Links, yeah, it's a beauty. So, Stu, anything you wanted to close out on in terms of encouraging more people to get into small business and to stay in the way that works for them?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm a huge advocate for small business, but I don't think anyone should ever underestimate how challenging and difficult it is. Right? It's not an easy option. It's clearly the hard option. The easy option is go get a job working for the man and in a big company and just suck it up and take a paycheck and do it. The small business is hard, but it's also infinitely more, in my opinion, this is just my thinking, it's infinitely more satisfying than anything you will ever do in a business environment, because if you pick a small business and it's something that really is a passion of yours, and I was actually talking to one of my kids about this, because, there's this generation of work-life balance, this whole idea of, you've got to have work-life balance. And that's predicated on the fact that you hate work and love life, right? That you want to get,
yeah.
So you need a balance between the two. Now, what I said is, what if your work is the most fun you have in your life? And everything you do, not every day is roses, right? But it's a job that satisfies you, that stimulates you, that encourages you, that makes you happy, that makes you really, that pushes you in all manner of ways. Then work-life balance disappears, because work is great. And it'll help make life great too, because one of the reasons about work, the work-life balance is such a challenge, is because people come out of the work part of that grumpy and miserable and anxious. And if you come out of the work part of it positive and vibey and energetic, then you're a better person to live with, frankly. So your life side of it is probably is better. And I have loved my experience in Four Pillars, and I've loved the 10 years that I had there, and I also love my Liquid Ideas experience. And and I've learned a lot from it about not just about business and how to do deals and all that sort of stuff, but equally about myself and how I operate. And I think it's made me a better human at 54 than I might have been had I not done it. So I mean, look, if you're going to start a small business, don't ever think for a minute that it's going to be easy. It's a relentless slog, right? But it can be a hugely
gratifying,
invigorating, relentless slog.
Yeah.
If you're doing something you truly love. And I was lucky in that regard. So and if the exit comes, and I don't even know if I'm capable, whether or not I'm ever going to live this down. But if the exit comes and you do have to leave with grace and try to pull the pin, and don't second guess all the people who come after you, and certainly don't disparage the people who come after you, and don't roll your eyes that I would have done it better this way. It's a very strong there's like a giant magnet pulling you towards staying involved, and you've just got to try to force yourself back out.
I think that when that exit does come, a fundamentally important decision you should have already made is what's next, what fills in, because you've just talked about, there is a gap, and it's not about, we're not talking about financial stuff here. We're talking about purpose and commitment and fulfillment and all those things, and it so anytime contemplating getting out, you've got to have a sense of what replaces that. Doesn't have to replace it at 50 hours or 60 hours a week, but it's you got to go have a view of what you can do next. So, hey, Stu, Gregor, thanks very much. If anybody wanted to reach out to you, are you happy for
pop on, go on my LinkedIn. You've got my LinkedIn, haven't you? Is that the best way?
Yeah. So is it
Stuart Gregor?
Stuart Gregor. And on LinkedIn, and we'll put
send me a message.
Yep. And again, thank you for your time, and you stay well.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed the chat. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks, Stu.